Hey, what's up guys, my name is Cherno. Welcome back to my code review series, a series in which I take a look at all the stuff you guys send me. Now, we're continuing on with this 2,000 hour 2D game engine. I've already made 2 videos on this topic. Last one will be linked up there. For some reason, you guys were a little annoyed at me for not looking at the actual code. And whilst yes, it is true that in the first episode, we just looked at the GitHub README. And then in the second episode, we just looked at the main, like, first C++ file in the project. You can't rush these things. There's just so much to say in every fragment of this project. That pillow is sideways. That I've kind of been enjoying just taking this slow, but if you want me to speed up, then fine. In this video, I'm gonna try just to fly through all the code so that we actually, because quantity is better than quality, right? We'll just fly through the code and we'll try and get an actual proper look at this engine and read some of the code that we have here. Okay, so without further ado, here is the one file that we looked at. Let's take a look at what actually happens. There's the UI project selector, which I mentioned you don't want to have in the runtime, so it doesn't quite make sense that it's here. I think I saw some people commenting saying that it's, you know, there's another project, or there's another solution file here. And this second solution is this like assets solution. And that I think includes the engine. Yeah, here we go. Then it's got a main function and all of that. So this is in fact like a separate solution that's supposed to be your game. I still don't like that system. I still think that it's better to have it separated into different modules. There's honestly a heap of reasons why, but without getting too deep into this, I think my main issue with it has to do more with the build configuration. Like, because this project is physically a different project to what we had before. So the setup that we're seeing here are basically these two. There's the engine, and then there's the engine also, but in the form of a game. But this is part of the assets project, and this is part of the sprite engine project. That means that all of these specific, you know, like preprocessor definitions, include paths, all of that is going to be duplicated across these 2 projects. Whereas if you just have, like, even build systems aside, if we were just using a project that was called sprite engine, and then we had a project called editor which used it, and then also a project called game which used it, then we could obviously just maintain that central project file. And if you had a build system, you would maintain that module as just like a static library with all of its own configuration and all of that stuff. It would just be a lot easier to organize, not to mention the fact that since this is the editor, but it's also the engine, it's a little hard to tell what's what. You know, like, which files here are editor only? Like, there's this UI inspector that has nothing to do with this. So is it included here? Oh, it's not. There's no GUI components. But then there's all these engine components, and half of them are here. Half of them, I guess, are not. I mean, this is here, but this is here inside a filter. And I guess, like, this is the same physical file on disk, right? You see what I mean? Like, this just becomes harder to organize. So I would definitely bring all of this common engine, core engine functionality into a separate module, Visual Studio project, static library, whatever you want to call it, called, you know, Sprite Engine Core or something, and then have all the other projects reference that. Now, speaking of which, I know that I do a lot of talking about what I would change and not so much showing exactly how I would do it. So what I am planning to do for the next video, hopefully, in this series, is actually put what I'm saying into practice and show how I would organize this and how I would set it up, and we'll actually do that to this project. I think that will be a little bit more helpful. Let me know in the comments if you think that's a good idea. If you are just getting started with programming and you also want to learn math, and there's an excellent free way that you can do that with a sponsor of this video, Brilliant.org. Brilliant.org is an amazing website filled with lots and lots of really high quality courses on various STEM topics. As I mentioned, fantastic place to get started with computer science. Their visual, interactive, engaging courses will really help you learn a lot about the basics and think like a programmer. Then this also extends to math. No matter what your math level is, if it's really, really beginner and you have no idea what you're doing, this everyday math course is fantastic for that. It'll teach you the ropes. It'll really help you out. But then all the way to things like linear algebra and calculus, again, being taught in this visual, interactive way with these widgets you can play with, getting quizzed so that you learn and retain the information. That is Brilliant.org in a nutshell. But hey, don't take my word for it. You can get started for free. Brilliant has a 30-day free trial that you can use to look at everything they have to offer. And then if you do go on to like it, then the first 200 of you who sign up for an annual membership will get 20% off. Huge thank you to Brilliant.org as always for sponsoring this video. One final thing that's bugging me a little bit about this as well is the fact that it's not just in some kind of reasonable location. This asset, like, it's called assets and it's inside the resources and template. because I guess this is like the new game template. So that's kind of interesting because like, I mean, as if I need more reasons to not like this not being a separate project. But one other reason is what happens when you add a file to the engine. Like if I'm developing the engine and I add an extra file, like a C++ file, how is it going to get compiled as part of this project? I'm going to have to manually add it to this project file because then it just simply won't get built as part of this solution and as part of this project. So yeah, whilst I can see why you may have set it up this way, there are just better ways to do that. And as I mentioned, I'm going to show you exactly how next video. Now, I think before we go on, maybe we should just try and run this actual game engine because I'm pretty sure, so it doesn't build and release, I think, from last time. But it does run, and we can try and create a project. And then I didn't like this. I remember I didn't like this being in the C drive. Okay, so I've just made this code review directory, and then I think create is this form. So I have to click this plus, and then I get to give it a name. So let's just call this example project. Create. Okay, it's run a bunch of stuff over here, 256 files copied. So yeah, everything from that template has been copied. And then now I have this example project, which I can click on and it will open over here. It's opening on my other monitor, by the way, just because I've made that monitor my main for the purpose of this video. But here we go. So here, we're finally looking at this project. We're finally looking at this sprite engine project. It's also a little bit blurry. You can see the text here. I mean, zooming in won't help, but the text here is blurry. That's because, yeah, it's fine on this monitor, although it looks very like not anti-aliased, and it doesn't actually draw properly on this monitor. If I just switch my recording to the second monitor, then you can see how like the panels, I guess, don't get resized properly. It's a bit weird. Anyway, I suspect the blurry text is probably because I've put my display scale to 150%, again, for the purposes of recording this video, so it's a bit easier for you guys to see if you're watching on mobile. I don't know if I'm gonna like try and make a game with this or something. This is all very like, I can't resize any of the panels. This inspector's all, I think it's really not playing well with my display scaling, which is a shame. Then we got these like scripts here. What do I do with this? Okay, create sprite. Okay, so here we got a sprite. We're getting somewhere. What does that button do? Oh, these are like gizmos. I see. And right click is to move around. Scroll wheels to zoom in. So I have gizmos, I guess, that I can use to resize this. But I have to grab the top bar. Okay, this is very bizarre. I got this. We can show and hide it. Again, I can't see half the inspector, which is bizarre. Also, okay, that's just moving the viewport, I guess. I thought it was moving the sprite. Sprite render, okay, we got the default PNG here that we're, yep, sorting layers. We got box collider. So it's got some physics, I guess, using Box 2D probably. Definitely not the biggest fan of this UI in general. It needs a bit more, I don't know, color or something. Edit the box collider. Like, see, all of this, like, you know, even something as simple as making this green, or maybe not green in this case, red or blue, or I don't know, something so that it's not, because what's the gizmo, what's the box collider? Like, it really does need some UI work. By the way, if you think I'm being mean, then refer to the original email in which the author asked me to roast them as much as I can. So honestly, I don't think I'm being mean. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I guess we need like a camera, right? So, I mean, I can only create sprites. Oh, okay. So there's just a single camera and then it's got zoom and speed. I don't know if this is supposed to play, but I can't press that. I was hoping it would like fall because I made it a box collider, right? Let's see. Solid. Does it also need, oh, it needs a physics. Probably needs a physics body as well. And scrolling down is a bit broken. I don't know if this is just, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think this UI in general is broken because it was weird on my other monitor as well. But I can't, okay, there's a physics body. So if I hit play, I'm not seeing anything, unfortunately. I was hoping it would like fall or something. And then there's these scripts. Like, what am I meant to do with this? I should probably watch the video. You know what? Maybe I won't try use this today. I'll watch the video that was in the GitHub README. To be honest, I don't know how deep I want to go into this project, but maybe I'll watch the video and I'll try using it next time because this is just, I don't know. Seem to be failing at. Oh, okay. So that lets me move the position, and this is the scaling, and play just does nothing apparently. Let's save this and I can build it. Oh, maybe I have to build it and then run it. Okay, whatever. Let's go back to the code. Okay, so I've collapsed everything so we can start looking at this. We'll just go into the main game engine file because I'm assuming that contains all of this and we can start looking at the code. So that has, okay, so immediately, like I say this all the time, but honestly, I like it when private is below public. And my reasoning for that is always the fact that when you look at a class, you immediately want to see what it offers you. And this is what it offers you because this is like the implementation details of this class. So that's why I always put this below, especially if you've got so much stuff. It's kind of like when I first open this, I have to scroll past all of this stuff to see, okay, this is how I use the class externally. Because usually with classes, you're using them more often than you are developing them. And if you are developing them, having private bit. Anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about this so much. Let's move on. So here's a constructor. Okay, I notice you're using this a lot, and then you're also using the M underscore convention, but not always. So I'm guessing you're not here because these are public, and then these are private, so they have M underscore. I like M underscore. I think it's great. Is M underscore mixed with snake case, which I don't think I've ever seen before, but whatever. You have this everywhere. You definitely don't need that. The only time I would ever use this when referencing an object or a symbol that is part of this class is if there's a name conflict. So if you have, I don't know, a parameter here, like mclose or something, then obviously there's like to differentiate between these two, you have to use this because they have the same identical name. Usually that's not an issue if you use M underscore. And for those of you wondering about public variables, in my naming convention, I like to capitalize public variable names like this, so the first letter is capital. That's just my convention. So if I had like a struct filled with data members, they would all be capital without M underscore only for private members. Okay, so then let's see here. So we're using SFML, we're creating a render window. This definitely, like, when it comes to abstraction, in my view, this is not abstracted enough because you're creating windows and like different windows to render to and all these event types. Like that should be a little bit further away. I would probably package that up into a window class just to abstract all of that away. And also you could build up your own API around it, because if you look at this, like there's a lot of stuff here that is specifically related to window things. So poll events is obviously about the window. So is update window style. There's this render window events. All of these things could be abstracted further down into a window class, and that would really free up this to be more about all the different systems of the engine, because this is game engine.cpp, so this is equivalent to Hazel's application.cpp. This is like the main hub of where everything gets kicked off from and where everything is kind of stored. Some things are stored statically or might have different lifetimes, and things related to a project that you have open will be stored relative to that project because their lifetime. So for example, an asset manager is going to be relevant to a project, because if you switch projects, you're obviously going to unload the asset manager. So it makes sense to tie the lifetimes together. You wouldn't have it for the lifetime of the whole application. But in general, that application should really be like this hub where you have your app, and then everything else, all the different game engine systems, they all connect here, whether it be like renderer, sound, physics, storage, whatever else you have there, window, like that all connects here. And this class should be the glue that ties all of this together and also controls these systems, as well as kicks off the rest of what you actually have in your app. So whilst you might have different systems, like global systems tied into here, you'd also have app basically running update, render, whatever else you have. Maybe you have a layer system and you have to go through all the layers and execute updates so that you actually do something in your application. That would kick that off. So therefore, as you do add more systems, it makes sense to separate them out into their own files, into their own classes, so that this is a lot cleaner. SFML init happens over here, and we have some kind of cleanup. Initializer. So we have a class called init other classes. Wow. That name. And again, with functions, like you really don't need that. You really don't need this everywhere. So init scenes, scene names. Okay, this is interesting. Scene file, path to scene file, and it's just a define. Oh my gosh, what's going on here? File data macros.h. Really wonder what that file is. Okay, so we have these various extensions. This is okay. Path to resources. Yeah, you just have these strings being joined to like concatenated here. Yeah, this I really don't like. And then I'm just not sure why. And then okay, so you have, I'm guessing, let's go back to that. I'm just lost for words here. Let's go back to this. Wait, do I still have that open? Assets. Yeah, I do. Okay, so this is the assets thing. So maybe when you start, okay, but you just call game start. I'm just wondering, where do the scenes come from? Because if I'm just launching this, I'm guessing the scenes are, so there's current scene and there's scene names, and these are private. So where do they come from? I mean, it's private, so it'd have to be here unless we have friend classes, which we don't. So let's try and track this down. Like, scene names. I don't understand where they come from. We do init scenes, so they've got to come from disk. So we have a file called scenes.scn. Okay, sure. And then that file, we're going to open that file up, and then we're going to read it, and then we're going to figure out if so that's going to be a list of files to load, basically. So we have a file that contains a list of files to load. They're all going to get pushed back into this scenes vector. And then I'm guessing we'll have a way to open a particular scene. And this is all inside initializer.cpp. And then there's this like the user, this is all static. This is all static. And then there's user first scene name, which has to be defined here to be scene 1. I would definitely do this differently. I think that you should have the concept of a project file. So the project file, if we just look at Hazel for a second, so we have Hazel ships with this sandbox project, and we have sandbox.hproj, and that is a file. This is a file that we use for development. So this isn't shipped, but this is like a file that you can load, and you can see it has a start scene. Now, the reason this is only used for development is, first of all, it's just a bunch of text, but also, you know, the start scene being a file path, that would get converted into an asset handle, and we would have this scene file be part of the asset pack, and it wouldn't, like, the file path wouldn't exist, of course. It would just be referenced by its universally unique ID. Anyway, the point is, though, you can see that the concept here is that you have a project, and all the metadata related to that project, even if it is just for development, because this does extend to the runtime just in a different format, is all of this being stored centrally, so that you know, for example, what is the first scene that I start when I run this game. Now, there is also not a collection of scenes. It's really odd to me that there is a collection of scenes inside a file, and one of them is hard-coded to be, and of course, I'm assuming you can change this. So this is the other problem that I'm not really liking. Like, file data macros, like, this is where exactly? This is inside engine source data. So here it is, file data macros. You can customize this per game, I'm assuming. So like you could have, well, prefab sandbox is the name there. So you could have like, you could override this and be like, all right, for my game, that's the start scene. But then that means that this entire code base is relevant to a specific game. But I guess that's the case anyway, because you're compiling it all into one project anyway. So obviously these exact C++ files that are referenced here, it's almost like you need a separate checkout for game then. Every time you want to make a game, you should, even though you have this launcher where you can load any project you want, if you just use this one instance of this game engine, then any changes that are made would automatically affect all the games, which also isn't a great system because, well, if I want to, for example, do this, then that would make sense if I was making more than one game. But anyway, going back to this scene system, which is crazy, having a scenes file which lists out like all of the scenes that are part of this project. Oh, hang on. I think I'm misreading this a bit. So if scene size greater than 0, we do this. Otherwise, okay, right. So if we read that file and there's nothing in there, then we use the first scene name, which would be, you know, scene 1, which is a separate file. So that's if we don't have an actual scenes file, or if there's nothing in it, if it's like empty or whatever. Because if it does manage to load scenes from the file, it will just be the first one in the list. Okay, so that's already a little bit better than a hard-coded name, but still having a list of scenes like that, and then we just automatically load the first one, is really interesting, because my next question would be, how do you transition between scenes? Would you really just be like, all right, now switch to scenes 2 when we switch to something else, rather than either having a handle or a file path or a name or something relevant to that scene? Because then what you'd be creating is, let's just say scene 0 is your main menu. So you're inside your main menu, and then you need to move on to your main game scene, which then would kind of be hard-coded as the second scene within your list of scenes. And then maybe that's level 1. So really, if you want to load level 5, because that's where you're up to in the game, you'd load like this, or I guess it really would be 5 then, because 0 is main menu. Like you load that, and again, that has to be in a particular order inside a text file. So yeah, I really don't like that. Aside from that, custom file formats, I'm also not the biggest fan of. I would much prefer to use something like YAML, which is, you know, a well-established format with a syntax and with a standard. Not to mention that when you have to encode more complicated things, it's a lot easier because it's standardized. It's kind of done for you. And then finally, as I mentioned a lot in the last video, you have to keep coming back to the main user base of this, which is the players playing the game. So when you ship this, what happens to this? Because obviously there's no distinction here between what is part of the development or part of the editor and then also part of the runtime. So as far as I'm aware, this happens in the runtime as well. So you have to load a text file filled with all these different scenes. Like if someone just wants to play a particular scene, if someone's stuck on level 5 and they want to advance, you could just edit this file really easily and just change what scenes are played. And in fact, if you rearrange them as well and they're just addressed by index, that could also be a problem. But it's not even like the rearranging is, I'm not even worried about people hacking the game or just going in there and changing stuff as much as I am like trying to organize development. Because you add a scene you can't add a scene in the middle of this list because it pushes all the other scenes down, which could be problematic. Yeah, it's just a really weird, it's just a really interesting way of handling scenes that I don't think I've ever seen before. Huh. Pun intended. All right, anyway, let's get past this init scenes thing. So then we load whatever scene was selected, whether that be a scene called scene 1, if there's nothing in the list of scenes, or the first list in the list of scenes. So now we're trying to load it. And how do we load it? S scene gets set to scene name. Wasn't S scene already scene name? Yeah, because we're trying to load S scene. What? Okay, so you're just resetting it just in case. I guess this gets called from somewhere else. Maybe current scene is scene name. Clear engine up before scene load, which is sprite repository cleanup, which, delete at. Oh my gosh, what is this? So this is a list of sprites inside sprite repository. We need to iterate through every sprite pointer there and then call a function inside sprite repository to delete at I because it might have children. Oh my goodness me. And where are the children stored? So we have to go through that. Parent pointer child. Okay. All right, I see what's happening here. Oh, I don't like this either. So when you store things, so what's happening here is inside the sprite repository, we have a list of sprites, right? And it's a vector of sprite pointers, but these are not all of the sprites in the scene. No. These are all the parents. These are all of the root level sprites in the scene. So what you have is a vector which stores sprite pointers contiguously in memory like this. However, each of these guys has the potential to have children, but the children aren't in this main vector. They're stored as pointers within each sprite. So then you essentially, inside each one of these, you have a list. And this can keep going forever. And that is not good. What you should absolutely do is this should be every single sprite in your scene. You should just have a flat list of every sprite in the scene. And the way you have children is you don't have sprite pointers, you just have indices. So in other words, this is a vector, right? So we have indices for each of these elements. This might be 14, 15, 16. You could just have sprite at index 1. What children does it have? Oh, it's got 14, 15, and 16. How do I get those? I look at the main list of sprites and I pull out this. Why? Because again, it's this concept of keeping your memory contiguous, meaning when it comes time to render everything, you're not walking a tree and going through all of this, trying to get through all the sprites. You're just iterating over a vector. Really simple, really nice and easy. When you need to delete all the sprites, like we've just found here, you just iterate through the vector and you delete everything. There is no, oh, does this have children? Okay, if so, let me go down a level to see the vector of children they have. I need to delete all of those. But first, before I delete all of those, I need to look at their children to see what's up. Like you can see, this is just a nightmare. This is very confusing. And this is actually much more complicated than just simply doing this. Another potential video idea, by the way, might be how to set something like this up instead of doing this, because I can see why this would be potentially the first thought, but it's just much better to have a flat list and that's it. And again, the way that I come to that conclusion usually, like when I'm trying to decide, okay, what is truly better is the use case. right? It's the what am I doing most of the time? And most of the time I am going through everything in a kind of linear like fashion, and I'm trying to render it or update it. And if it comes down to me having to go to all the children and navigate, that's a problem. Now, the thing is, every child here will also have a parent index though, right? So for example, 14, 15, 16, like we've written here, they're gonna have their own children potentially, sure, which again would just be a vector of integers, right? Which would be the indices. But then you'd also have a parent. So their parent will be 1, right? So each of these would have a parent, 14, 15, 16, because they're up here, and the parent will be 1. The reason why that's useful is because if you are using this parent-child hierarchy because you need to calculate the world transforms. So if every sprite, obviously down the hierarchy, will have a local transform that will be relative to its parent, then of course you need to go through and you need to calculate the actual world transform before you can render any of this. And when you do that, you can see whether or not you need to because there's a parent or not. So in other words, 1 would just not have a parent, which could be expressed as -1, could be, you know, uint32 max or whatever you want, assuming 0 is an actual valid index. And so in certain situations, you would potentially need to see whether or not you have a parent or if you're like a root level node. So what I'm saying is this functionality of, yeah, but I want my root level nodes, you could still have that, obviously. Like, it's just a matter of checking to see if this has a parent or not. And same with the childless, like the leaves, right? If you have a leaf that has no children, then you could easily just check to see whether or not there's anything here, or is this vector empty because there are no children. And I don't know if this feels like a minor point, but this is a major point because this is the heart of the entire engine. The entire sprite engine, this sprite repository, like this is the heart. This is probably the single most important system in the whole engine because everything revolves around, well, these things, these sprites, these entities. So getting this right is super, super important. And again, something as simple as just cleaning up would just be this. Like instead of delete at I, it would literally just be that. Like you just go through and delete that. And in fact, if these sprites were shared pointers or whatever in the first place, then it would be even easier. You would just do this. That's it. Like how great is that? How easy is that? Writing complicated things like game engines actually comes down to simplifying as much as you can because the existing natural complexity of what you're working on, that will organically grow to just massive heights. And so I think being a good, experienced programmer a lot of the times really is about trying to keep everything as simple as possible. Because believe me, if you blow out things like this, then you're just not going to be able to scale. Like you will not be able to scale well and still keep all of the moving parts working because that's another thing about a game engine. It's a whole bunch of completely independent systems that have to come together and synergize well. If they don't fit together and work well with each other, nothing's gonna work. That's one of my favorite things about working on a game engine. The fact that it's like anything I can think of would probably fit in somehow into a game engine. Any kind of system. I'm interested in physics, I can take a look at that. I'm interested in like fluid simulation, yeah, sure. Path tracing, like, yeah, chuck that into the application, you know what I mean? Like it's just built from all of these completely different systems. And keeping everything sane, keeping yourself sane, but then also keeping the code sane is such an important skill. And it definitely does take time to develop, but definitely try and always ask yourself, am I doing things as simply and as clearly as possible, or am I adding complexity that probably doesn't need to be there? All right, we touched the code today. I fulfilled my promise. Hope you guys enjoyed this code review. If you did, please don't forget to hit the like button. I really want to continue looking at this. I think there's so many different actionable outcomes that we're finding here, things that we would definitely want to do to improve this. Next time, as I mentioned, I want to take a look and show you how to organize this project structure just into something better, and also how to convert this to actually use a build system. I think that'll be really helpful, hopefully, for the author of this project, as well as for everyone else watching who might have something similar. Let me know what your thoughts were about everything that I mentioned here in this code review. Don't forget to check out brilliant.org/thecherno, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.